Okay, 2.5 is literal equations, and most students have seen these before, and some struggled, some didn't, but we like to revisit it because it just really strengthens your solving and manipulation skills. So I like the way it states your objective because you are just rearranging. So you are not solving, you are just isolating the variable that they want. And a lot of these times you would do this for real life applications in physics and sciences, things like that. So we're just going to extend this to also involve squared variables in this course. All right. So what is a literal equation? It is literally a formula with more than one variable. It can have 8 variables. It can have 2 variables. Okay. So they work the same way that linear equations do. When you want to get a linear equation by itself, you do the inverse operation. So if it's adding, you subtract. If it's multiplying, you divide. And there's more than one correct answer for some of these. So if it's multiple choice, you just have to be flexible. So a few tips to get your requested variable alone is I usually like if you have all one fraction on one side, okay, then what I would do is I would multiply by the denominator to get rid of the fraction, okay? If you have adding or subtracting, and I'm just going to say hanging off, then you're going to do the inverse operation, inverse, add or subtract. But usually I like to multiply or divide last. If there's distributing, I usually distribute. But really it's going to depend on what you're given and what variable you want to get alone. So let's just look at a few examples. So look at example 1, and I have 6 here. So if we want to get x alone, that means we have to move this 2 and we have to move this 2. So we always do the object that's hanging off, the adding or subtracting. So I'm going to just add 2. And you can't really add 2 to u, but you can put it side by side, and we just write it as u plus 2. If you wrote 2 plus u, that's also the same. That cancels, and so I'm left with 2x. So now, to get x alone, since those are being multiplied, we're going to divide. And when you divide, you do it by everything. So you have 2 options. One answer might look like this, or they could have actually divided those 2 separately, and so your other answer could look like this. They would have the u over 2 plus, and then you can do 2 divided by 2. These are both great answers, and it really just depends if this was a multiple choice, which one they preferred. Okay, so you get to pick. Let's look at number 2. So if we want to get a alone, we have to move the k and we have to move the b. So this follows under that first suggestion. If we have all one fraction, we want to multiply by that denominator. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to multiply both sides by b. So those cancel. That's why we do it. So you get bu, or ub, it's fine, equals a times k. So now focus. We want a alone. And since that's a times k, we want to get rid of the k. So since that's being multiplied, you're going to divide by what you want to get rid of on both sides. So bu over k equals a. So see how we're just moving terms? We're not solving, okay? All right, let's look at a. We have a fraction, but it's not all one fraction, so that's what I call hanging off. So if I want to get a alone, the b is hanging off, so that's what I'm going to move first. It's positive, so that's why I'm subtracting. So z minus b. You could have also had negative b plus c, but I think most students write it like this, equals m divided by a. Now you have 2 choices. I can multiply both sides by a, which that's what I'll do, because I think that's what a lot of students will do. Now, since these are together, you would have to write it with a parenthesis, okay? Because I have to multiply both z and b by a. But I don't really want to multiply by a because a is what I want to get alone. So don't distribute. Since this is A, I'm going to write it nicer. I just want to get that A alone. So all I really need to do, since those are being multiplied, is I can divide by these together. And then those cancel, and so we're done. A equals M divided by Z minus B. And there was other options to get that alone. I just chose one to show you. Example 3, we want to get this A alone. So I have to move the 3B, this 2, and that 2. So we can actually move these in the same side. So I can subtract 3B, and I can subtract 2. So I get U minus 3B minus 2 equals negative 2A. And then this kind of looks like example 1. I want to get A alone, so those are being multiplied, so make sure you divide by negative 2. Now, you can put a negative out in front. You might see this on multiple choice. Okay? Or what that negative really does is it changes all the signs in the top. So you might see it written as negative U plus 3B plus 2 all over. These are both great answers, okay? I just want you to know the flexibility for multiple choice. All right, example 5, the W is inside a parenthesis, so this is a case where I do need to distribute. You don't have to, there is another option, but I think for most students, this is the easier option. Okay, so then we will subtract 2L. So P minus 2L equals 2 times W. And so then to get that W all by itself, we'll divide by 2. I like to keep them together, but remember we do have that flexibility of, like example 1, we can split them up. I just don't really think there's a reason to. Okay? All right, so now we move on to the squareds, which is what's new for this course. So if you want to get P alone, we're still going to add D squared to both sides. So C plus D squared equals P squared. Okay? You're not allowed just to take the square root of everything at the beginning. So now, the opposite of squared, we've seen this when we solved, is to take the square root. And what you have to realize is when you take a square root, remember, it's plus and minus. So those cancel, so you get P equals plus or minus C plus D squared. A lot of people forget the plus and minus when you have the square. Okay? It's partial credit. So the last one, I just want to practice another squared. But this one's different because we start out with a whole quantity on the right, and I meant to say solve for D. So since this is all squared, I can't add the 5 because it's inside. So we are going to take the square root right now, and since we're taking a root, it ends up being plus or minus root J. Those cancel, so we're left with D minus 5. Okay, so now to get D alone, we'll add 5, and we'll add 5. And usually because this 5 is positive, we write that first. All right, so there we go. Work on your literal equations and see how you do.